John, very often, as I think we discussed that you have been misunderstood. You have used the words like primitive and composites. Can you explain? Do you mean primitive would mean smaller, granular, or because that's what I see people misquoting you or misunderstanding every time they hear you saying primitive. It kind of creates an impression that we're talking about something which is smaller or granular. Is that what you meant, or when you say primitive, do you mean something else?
Well, that is a complete misunderstanding, okay, because that means that whoever makes that assumption, they have not studied anything I've written or anything I've ever talked about, or they have not studied the ontology. They don't understand ontologies. They're making an assumption that is totally incorrect. It doesn't have anything to do with how big or small the components are that you're looking at. Every category of an ontology is uniquely different. They're completely independent and completely different. Now, I use the word primitive because it comes from the words primitive interrogatives. Each one of those primitive interrogatives describes something completely different. What the material composition, the inventories of the enterprise, those are completely different than the processes or transformations of the enterprise. Those are completely different than the locations, the networks of the enterprise. Those are completely different from the responsibilities of the enterprise, and so on. Those are completely different. It's not a matter of how big or small they are, but right. I got the word primitive from primitive interrogative. Now, I can't resist this, Sunil. It would take a program, a computer program. Are you going to find data elements expressed in the program which are a derivative of column 1, the material composition or the inventories of the enterprise? Right. Yes, there will be data elements expressed. Are there going to be instructions expressed in the program? Those are process or they are some kind of functionality. It's a transformation. You will express instructions? Yes. Are there going to be addresses expressed, locations of those data elements or the locations of those instructions? Yes. Are there going to be screen formats or work product formats expressed in the program? Yes. Are there going to be control structure, timings expressed in the program? Because the timing of which you execute the add, subtract, multiply, and divide functionality, or if you change the timing, it's going to change the end result. Are there going to be constraints or rules, constraints expressed? If this condition exists, then do that. Is that going to be expressed in the program? Yes. So you're going to have column 1, data elements, column 2, instructions, column 3, addresses, column 4, work product formats, document formats, or screen formats. You got column 5, cycle times, control structures, column 6, constraints or conditions, rules. Is a program a primitive? No, a program is a composite. Right. Is a program an engineering idea, or is it a manufacturing idea? No, it is a manufacturing idea, not an engineering idea. So granular, primitive does not mean small. It doesn't mean granular. It means they are independent variables. They're uniquely different, and an ontology uniquely classifies every fact, every primitive fact, single variable fact that are relevant to the existence of whatever the object is for describing. And my framework, of course, is for describing enterprises. So therefore, the primitive components are independent, single variable, uniquely different, uniquely differentiated, single variable parts.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is that if you have a model, and in that model, if you're only representing primitives of one type, that could be a process type or it could be location type, as long as the representations are restricted to one type, and only then they are primitive.
That's absolutely correct. Think about this. The engineering description is a single variable. You only want one thing in the picture. the manufacturing problem is if you only have one thing in the picture, it doesn't do anything. We'll go to the chemical metaphor again. You have carbon. If all you have in the picture is carbon, it doesn't do anything. You have to have a compound. You have to have more than one primitive component before you get anything that can be instantiated. You have to have carbon and oxygen, or carbon and hydrogen and other things. There has to be a compound before it becomes implemented.
Right.
So the periodic table, a table of primitive components, can be combined in an infinite variety of ways to create an infinite variety of compounds. Just like from my framework standpoint, there's 36 cells basically, and the combination of those 36 cells, you can create an infinite number of composite manifestations of the enterprise.
Okay, great. So just to kind of reconfirm that I have understood what you're saying. So as long as my model has elements of the same type, take example like location types, then they are primitive. And as soon as I have a model where I have a representation of a location along with, let's say, responsibility, then that model becomes a composite.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
And so when you say primitive, you don't mean smaller or granular. When you say primitive, you actually mean a single variable model, one variable type at a time, and then you could combine these one variable at a time with the variables across different columns, or what you're using the words abstractions, primitive interrogatives. So once you combine the primitives from different columns, then they tend to become the composite, and these composites are created to address different enterprise issues and challenges.
That's absolutely true. It's like if you want, if the engineering descriptive representation is a single variable because you want to minimize you don't want any reoccurring concepts within that single variable fact. You want to normalize everything. Right. And that single variable is not good for manufacturing. For manufacturing or implementation, you need multiple variables. You have to have a composite. But you want to create the composite out of the engineered primitive components. The chemical engineer works with the elements to create compounds. The compounds are created from single variable elements, but you can create a compound, but if you do not know what the elements are or how you combine them, then your compound is only going to be by trial and error, by practice. It'll be a best practice. It won't be engineered. It will be implemented but not engineered. So precisely the problem in the enterprise today. The enterprise is implemented but it is not engineered. It's little wonder it doesn't work very well, or you can't change it, or it's not lean, it's not dynamic. No wonder it was never engineered.